This video is part of Nickel J's journal on building a mountain cabin. Hi, I'm Nick at my cabin project in the central west Idaho mountains. I'm doing finish work. I'm covering the walls with tongue and groove fir and pine boards. So I've taken the cupping and twisting out of these planks with sticker stacking. The material is flat and seasoned. Now I'm dealing with the crook. The cupping and twisting is when the board sides rise. Crook is when the board bends from side to side. That's what I'll be dealing with today. I'll be removing the crook from about 50 crooked planks. That's my material stack. It's 14 foot 1 by 12 fir planks. First, I'll trim the edges so that they're straight. Then I'll run a router down the sides to turn them into tongue and groove. I'm going to break this video into two parts: straightening the lumber and cutting the TNG. I'll be using my cutting bench. Need to true the fence of the cutting bench. And I found that this string follows the path of the fence in just about all places but two. It bumps here. I don't know if you can see the string moving, but I sure can. It's okay here. Stop the string. It's good there. The idea is to have the string, the block come right next to the string but not bump it. Then here's another bad spot. It's bumping the string. Let's see if I can get some better light on that. You can see the string moving as I set the block down. Then here it's good again. So I have two spots where my fence pushes out this way. And that's not as easy to adjust. In a lot of places where my fence was too far that way, I just put shims back here between this 1 by 12 and this stick. But I can't do that. I need for this to go that way. And I might try just putting another screw in here. There's a screw here, and the next one is way over here. It's too far apart. And this is about where it's too snug. The fence is too far that way. So I'm going to put a screw in right here, see if that'll pull it over that direction. that is it. That's all I needed was that screw. Okay, let's work on this troublesome corner down here. There it is. Okay. This is the other spot I put a screw in. It's still good, not bumping the string. Okay, I've got a straight fence to straighten my material on. The bench fence is my default straight line reference. The straight backstop makes it simple to position the crooked planks for optimal cutting, and the fence helps keep a long, flexible saw guide straight. You'll see what I mean. As I sight down this first board, I can see that it's got a crook in it this way. The middle of the board is further out than the two ends. A simple sketch may help illustrate the crooked board. So I'll put it on the cutting bench the wrong way first to show you why it's wrong. Okay, let's say I snug this end up to the straight fence here. Notice this end has a big gap. I can stick my finger in there. Okay, now let's close this end up, push it with my belly, and you could hear this end scoot out. Put my finger in here. You could rock it back and forth and try to hit the middle. The easier way is to flip the sucker over, put both ends against the straight fence, got a gap in the middle, and now it's ready to cut. I know that I'm going to get the most material out of this board that I can just by putting the two ends against the straight fence. I'll use the front corners of the board to set up the saw's guide. I want to cut a straight line from corner to corner. The width of this block is the distance from the saw blade to the saw's fence. I use these blocks to position the saw guide. And I like to check and make sure that I'm going to make contact with my work all the way down. Oh, not quite there. Push it in a little bit. And not quite there. We'll go a little more. Okay, so it's close here, but that's all I need. I just need to touch the edge of this board. Okay, so my board and straight edge is ideally situated to straighten this edge, losing as little material as possible. This first cut will cut off the convex side of the crooked board. I like to set my blade depth so that the saw is just coming through the wood. That's way too deep. Just want it down maybe 3/16 of an inch past the bottom of my work. I pay attention to the cord. I don't want to step on my cord or hit the end of it while I'm in a cut. That'd ruin the edge of the board. It could. I usually drape the cord over my left arm so that I have a clear path to walk. To get started, I like to have the guard out of the way so that it's not kicking my saw around as I engage the wood. I check this side, make sure that my saw fence is flush with my straight edge. And I start the saw, keep an eye on the action right here and make sure everything's looking right. There's not a thing wrong with just letting your finger off the trigger. You won't leave any marks. If you need to adjust the cord or something, just let off the trigger, let the saw stop on its own. Start it up the same way. I like to put a little pressure back here. That's probably not a good idea from a safety perspective. The important thing is to develop a technique and stay with it. With each cut, I want to keep a consistent and steady pressure between the saw's fence and the straight edge. As I walk back down the bench, I'm unclamping. No sense in making an extra trip for that. Hang up my saw where I'll need it. Move my straight edge out of the way just enough. I tap the board once to get the sawdust off of it. Position it with the cut edge against my fence. Put my straight edge against the fence. Push both pieces up against the fence and clamp. I don't know if you can see it, but every time I push on my straight edge, I can see it cinch up. Well, that time I didn't. But here you'll see it. See, my straight edge isn't really straight until I push it up against the fence. The second cut is removing the concave side of the crooked board. unclamp. And as I walk down, I'm trying to keep my walkway clear so that I'm not stumbling on this waste material when I'm making cuts. It's just something I can do while I'm walking the length of the bench. Straight edge, remove dust. Voila. Repeat. Notice during the setup for cutting the first side of the board, I don't fuss around with the tape measure. Rather, I make sure that the saw blade will just make contact with the entire length of the plank. Then the cut edge of the board and the saw guide are both snugged up against the fence to cut the second edge of the board. Again, there's no need to fuss around with a tape measure or a ruler. That's because I chose the width of my straight edge. The width of my straight edge and the width of my saw setback equals the finished dimension that I want. When I started this ceiling project, I had to make a call on how wide to cut all the boards so that I could get straight edges on the majority of them. The pile was about twice that size, and I spent a lot of time pulling a string from one end of the planks to the other, getting an idea how much I had to cut out of the boards to get them straight. And I decided that I'd go with my setup here. The worst boards were crooked about an inch. A lot of them were up to about 5/8 of an inch, and that's what I set this up for. I'm taking about 5/8 of an inch off of most of them. That left me with about, I'd say 2% of the boards that I can't use because they were just crooked too much. I didn't want to take a lot of material off. I wanted to keep them as wide as possible because I think that's what gives the ceiling project a bit of a special character, is the width of the tongue and groove. That's a little bit unique. You don't see a lot of that. So I made that call. It turned out to where I'm pleased. I'll end up using the boards that didn't make the cut on something else. I'll probably put them on the floor or wrap the window seals or something with them. They won't go to waste, but they're not going to be used on my ceiling. I can change the width on these ceiling tongue and groove planks, but I have to keep the same width on a full run, on a full row, which means I have to keep track of them. And that adds a lot of complication that if I don't have to deal with it, I'm not going to. If I was real short on materials, I might be doing something like that. If you look up and there's a board 10.5 inches wide and another one that's 11 inches wide, you really can't tell the difference from 15 feet below. But it does add a lot of extra work, a lot of extra tracking for the installer trying to keep track of the different widths. Wow, look at the crook in this board. When a board looks like it may be too crooked to make my standard width, I can check it. Remember that the total width of my saw guide and the setback block equals the finished width of all my stock. I set the saw guide in place using the front corners of the board on its convex side. If I go to the middle of the board and check, I can still see some board right here. So I'm good to go. I can clamp. That's where I'm going to cut it. This board has so much crook that I may not be able to use it in this batch of tongue and groove. I've set the straight edge up so that I'll just barely make contact with the board on both ends. But when I look in the middle, over here, I'm not gonna get to the board. The board is crooked too far that way, and I'm not going to be able to get enough width out of it. So I'll go ahead and cut this edge straight, because I need to straighten the board anyway for whatever it ends up being used for. And I'll set it over here to the side in the coal pile to be used for something else later on. After I've cut one of the edges straight, I usually label them before I put the board in the coal pile. It makes it easier to work with the board later on. I would guess that 2 or 3% of my material stack was just too warped to make use of on this project. Okay, there's a couple of nice piles of straight planks. This will make good material for some tongue and groove. I also have a mess to clean up over here. So these boards started out cupped, twisted, crooked, pretty poor shape. They went into the sticker stacks. They were pressed with the weight of the sticker stacks. That flattened them out, got rid of the cupping and twisting. And it seasoned the wood, stabilized it. Then the edges were trimmed up on the bench that you just saw. And that's where I'll end this video, and I'll pick up in the next video as I'm trimming these boards into tongue and groove. Catch you later.